Welcome to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rosenwomble Realtor Paul Fuqua is here to share market facts, the fundamentals of selling, buying, owning, and improving your home, plus interesting experts. Now, here is Paul.
Welcome to the Real Estate PB&J Hour, where we discuss the elements of home selling, buying, maintenance, and improvement. As Dino has stated in the lead into this show, our purpose is to share the real estate news and advice and experience that we have collected over the years to help you make sound decisions on one of the biggest investments you'll likely ever make, your home and any other real estate properties you may own. I am Paul Fuqua. I'm a full-time professional realtor with Rosenwomble Realty. I've been lucky enough in my career to help hundreds and hundreds of buyers, sellers, and investors in this area over the past 25 years. My co-host today, once again, are real estate broker Kim Pimento, also at Rosenwomble, and the always entertaining fellow realtor who's back for the fourth week in a row, Bob Freck. And we're going to concentrate today on the changing real estate market and the importance of, and we're continuing this study, the many provisions in any agreement or contract to purchase property. Our last show got us to the provisions for inspections within the sales contract. We discussed property systems such as septic and well and the HVAC and other items, and the importance of structuring any offer to purchase in a fashion, and this was the key output from all during the discussion, is to avoid confusion in the contract on the issue of inspections and walkthroughs. Now, this show is all about the fundamentals of real estate and what you can do to maximize your ownership, buying, and selling power. And if you'd like to talk to me or Kim or Bob, dial 757-497-1310, 757-497-1310. Hopefully you'll be listening to us, and when you get home, go to the computer and turn us on because we're streamed at moneytalk1310.com. Please remember to call us if you have questions, because this stuff we say, it goes out into the air and it goes into outer space, and Bob and I were talking before the show that sometime 100 light years away from now, there may well be some alien being listening to this program and going, what's real estate? I mean, we don't have any kind of tangible body. What is a home? Hopefully they'll listen to the show and we'll still be cooking. Anyway. All right, we're not structured. We want to be able to offer opinions and experiences which can help in your process of compiling an offer on that perfect house. And we can also benefit you as a seller in reaching a mutual agreement with the buyers. Additionally, the idea that contracts are cast in stone has to be cast aside somewhat. One of the reasons why you use an experienced real estate agent such as myself or Kim or Bob or anybody in your family or whatever is to help you shape what is written in a fashion that will protect your interests in the best possible fashion. So with that, we're going to move on to the fact that market forces are changing the dynamics and of the whole process of selling homes, the trend of reduced list prices in order to attract more buyers to properties and to change other elements of the buying patterns continue in our area and nationally. As an example, we discussed last week, the sales price to list price ratio, which has been at 102% across the entire price range, has fallen in June to just under 101%, and that continues into July, while the list price per square foot of living area continues its growth. That's important. 2,000 square foot house, $200 list price per foot is a $400,000 house. Movement in the price per foot is where you can really gain an idea of the dynamics of price increases and decreases. Now, July is quite normally somewhat slower in buyer traffic through listed properties, although I know Kim has some information on what has transpired in the first 2 weeks of July, and she'll be with us in a minute. And I can attest personally to having brought a $700,000 plus piece of property on the market, and in the first 2 days I had 9 tours, scheduled visits by agents with their clients in tow. And at the 11th day, we had an offer that was over list price. So I was very happy, but I was also surprised in July. Kim Pimento, give us some background on what's going on. Oh, I tell you what, I forgot. I've got to welcome Bob Freck back. Bob, do you want to say something now that you've taken your mouth? You can say something now.
Can I say something now?
Yes,
okay.
you can.
Okay, it's good to be back. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And I think the listeners will gain a lot out of listening as they're heading home or at home, enjoying their homes.
Hopefully they'll call in 757-497-1310 and ask a question that we can answer. I haven't been dumbfounded. We still have the poll going on the favorites of jellies. Remember, I haven't gotten anybody else saying the Swedish meatball jelly, but we're still strong on grape jelly. I think it's up to 184, and we went up with the strawberry by about 20. So I don't have the final number on it. Lingonberries. That's what.
There you go.
Lingonberries.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right, Kim, tell us what's going on.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's glad to be back on this beautiful Thursday. It's a nice day outside. Well, back here at Hampton Roads, there are about 4,125 active residential listings, of which 3,297 of those are actually on the MLS and active, meaning a contract can be accepted on them. 833 of those are attached, which means a condo, co-op, townhouse, quads, duplex, other things like that. And the remaining are single-family homes. So this is an increase of 2% overall on a week-to-week comparison. And I think did I misread that, Paul?
I think
last week our count was 4,053 total, 326 single family, and 813 attached. Okay.
The big number is the next one. How many houses, how many of these units that are available, either single families or attached, are actually available to buy? That's right. The number because what have we got? 4,126, right? Total.
Yep.
Now, how many are actually available, not already under contract? Next paragraph.
That is 2,972, which is an increase of 59 or 2%, which shows that, we are seeing some inventory probably stay on the market just a little bit longer. And excuse me for messing that up. Sometimes you read these stats and they just kind of crumble together. But
remember, the people out there are listening, and that's why statistics are deadening. Right. We have to lighten them up. Maybe we can have Bob give us a little interpretation. Here. Not now. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, the main thing is that Zillow and some of these sites, Redfin, are also a little bit deceptive because they'll show a property as being active for a lot longer than it is, and it's so frustrating to buyers because you call on it and it's under contract. So that's the beauty of that. Just knowing that sometimes they're showing active and they really aren't. It's not your agent not doing their job. It's just that they are really under contract but not showing up. But we had some great activity over the weekend. We had some open houses, and one open house, she had about 12 people come through. 5 of those were active leads. 2 of them actually maybe wanted to sell their house. The other 3 were buyers. So people are getting out there. Sometimes I wonder if it's not because of the pictures, because I have a lot of people claim they'll walk into a house and think, is this the same house? And you'll look around, because we have very, very, very talented photographers in our area. And so anyway, I wonder sometimes if that is people just really, really want to get out there and see those houses in person instead of just online.
I think part of the attraction is going into what someone else has decorated in some instances. Now, what we did with one property, and certain if you've gone on Zillow and you've looked at the virtual tours or the 3D stuff, we virtually staged it, and we actually put furniture in the dining room, all virtual, living room virtual.
And that actually looks pretty good. When they first came out with that, it wasn't, I was thinking, furniture.
Right.
But it looks pretty good now.
And the great thing for buyers is that same software allows us to do a model. It almost looks like a dollhouse where you can rotate it. You can see from above and see the layout of the rooms and the dimensions. It's a phenomenal tool for people who are looking. I don't know how many times I've had buyers ask the dimensions of the bedrooms. And the small bedroom is 10 by 12, and if you're putting a queen in there or even a king, you're not going to be able to get to the closet, and that's the problem. And those measurements are going to be very easily obtained off this 3D stuff that we're putting on our listings for the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I think a lot of people buy according to their furniture, and I know definitely renters rent according to their furniture.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if they have a big bedroom suite they paid some money for, they're not going to get rid of it. Where a buyer, on the other hand, is probably a little bit more likely to ditch the bedroom suite if they found the house that they really wanted.
Bob?
So, good points on some of our experiences with the buyers, whether it be renters turning into buyers or buyers changing their home. I'd like to go back to something you said, Paul, earlier, and I think it was a really good point. Is there's the difference we mention every week on the percentage over, in this case, list price that houses are selling for. Mm-hmm. It was 102% over list price. Now it's down to 101% versus the dollar per square foot that a property is selling for. The dollar per square foot is what sellers are looking at for appreciation, what their house is going to sell for, mm-hmm. and there's really not much of a correlation between that and percentage over or below list price, other than that number often reflects the activity on the house and the popularity on the house. You have a real popular house that's well priced in an area that buyers are trying to get into, they will have a tendency sometimes with multiple offers to bid that price of the house up over list price to mm-hmm. get it, which pops that number up and stuff. So on the front end, dollar per square foot, sometimes we look at it and go, are they in the right range for their list price? And then it becomes sometimes a battle between buyers and how well their agent's written the offer, right, on where that second number comes in at.
Right.
Yeah, but don't you probably think that the reason our square foot price is stayed the same is because our prices are going to level out? Because we probably can't go much higher. So even though we're only getting 100% over list price, our prices are kind of staying the same, so our square footage is kind of going to level out a little bit of price per square foot. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think the one where we're going to see the change is in the price, the list price and sale price per foot of the smaller house, not the big house, not this a 5,000 square foot house. You have pretty much a cap on what that value per foot is. Simply because of market forces. But when you're talking about a smaller house, let's say a 2,000 square foot house, and you go from $150 a foot to $175 a foot, that's a sizable amount of money, and it has much more impact because you have a smaller divider. It's only 2,000 feet. So if you go up by $50,000, that's how much per foot? Somebody do the math. 2,000 feet.
It's a big number.
It's a big number.
And where dollar per square foot for the list price or the sales price figures in often is on new construction. Mm-hmm. Okay, and particularly if you're going to what we call in the business single siting house, where you're putting your house out, I don't know, out in the country somewhere. Right. You've got a single builder. You maybe interview 2 or 3 different builders to build your new house, and depending on how they'll come in with a basis of dollar per square foot on what they would consider their entry level house, and
the builders term it their loss leader number.
Yes.
If you go into a new home site, and I've had them as many as 55 to 70 different units, there is a number, and that number is the base house.
Yes.
And there is a factor that is used, and depending on the neighborhood and depending on the price range, that factor of upcharges or improvements or optioning up can run as low as 10% and as much as 20%.
Correct. And that you might be buying the exact same house,
right,
same square footage, but depending on the bells and whistles that you put into the house,
the price per
can
foot
change the dollar per square foot.
Let's get back to Kim, because how many houses closed so far in July? We had closings. Folks, are important because that's when the money changes hand, and that's when the key is delivered, which constitutes possession, and when the deed delivers, and that's what constitutes a consummation of the transaction. You own the property once the deed is delivered and the key is given.
Yeah, once the deed has been done, it's your house there.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so far in July, and this is the 14th, you have 825 closings. So we have, 16 more days in July? Mm-hmm. For all of June, there was 3,984. May, 3,339, in April, 3,706, which means we're going to lag behind in July.
Well,
maybe.
It's funny because so many people write contracts to close at the end of the month
That's true.
And we have a couple of minutes left, and one of the things we might want to discuss real quickly when we come back is why people think it's critical to close towards the end of the month. There's a financial aspect to the closing that has an impact. Yes, prorations, and you can save yourself some cash out of pocket by closing towards the end of the month.
At least for the first couple months, and then it all is a wash.
It all catches up.
After 2 months, it's all a wash.
But we gave my wife, when we bought, the opportunity to go out and buy some furniture because we saved this money.
And then the bill comes in the form of your mortgage payment.
Exactly. All right. This is Paul Fuqua. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour. I'm here with Bob Freck and the wonderful Kim Pimento, and you will be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Money Talk 1310 AM.
Now back to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rosenwomble Realtor Paul Fuqua gives you the fundamentals of real estate selling, buying, owning, and improving your home.
Okay, you're listening to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on 1310 AM, 100.9 FM, or moneytalk1310.com. This is we like to think, one of the best sources of information for you if you're a prospective buyer or seller in this local real estate market. I have the great pleasure of having Kim Pimento and Bob Freck here. You can call us and ask any questions at 757-497-1310. And if you wish, you can always go back, and this is our 26th show. So there are 25 shows on the YouTube channel, the Real Estate PB&J Hour. It's at no cost to you. You can go in, you can listen, you can hear what we've said on various subjects, and that's on that YouTube channel. Please subscribe because there's an incentive for us to get additional coverage if we get to a certain number of subscribers. Now, in the last 3 weeks, we've covered a lot of subjects, and I'm going to run down them very quickly that you can find on that YouTube channel. Is this market, should an offer be automatically list price? What's the importance of the description of the financing? What's the value of a larger earnest money deposit? How should a loan approval letter be phrased? How to state the down payment you're going to be making? What's the advantage to a seller of having an offer from a cash buyer? What entity is going to hold the earnest money deposit? With the market changing and points being charged, closing cost assistance from the sellers is not as yet that I've seen reappearing, but it could be. And there have been revisions in some of the lending theaters to how much there can be provided by a seller to a buyer. Should a deadline be set on a contract for the seller's response? And how critical is the settlement date to the strength of a contract? What inspections, and that's a key we're going to touch on in a second, but what inspections should be included and how extensive this, we spent some time last week, that's number 25 on the YouTube channel, how extensively should the buyer investigate the homeowners or condo owners association bylaws and documents, which have to be supplied under Virginia law, and you cannot waive that opportunity to review those. And we talked about the standard items to convey listed in Section 15 of the contract. How critical are them, and how do you expand them? And the other thing we had, and Bob chimed in with his voom voom crash. What's the aircraft noise and accident potential zone disclosure all about? That's old news, and it is on the YouTube channels. What do we want to talk about today? The first item, and I'm going to put you two on the spot. What's the difference? What are the key differences between a home buyer's inspection and a walkthrough inspection?
Okay, just real quick, just bouncing on that very last point you brought up. If you're a buyer coming into Hampton Roads from a different area of the country, you may not know what we talk about with the noise and accident zones for our airports around here. And so it's really critical, if you're going to be shopping for a house in Hampton Roads, that you tie in with a good realtor that's using the correct, most up-to-date chart that shows the noise and accident zones, because all three of us have gotten offers where, if you go back and check it, the noise and accident zones have been taken off the old chart when the F-14s and the A-6s were still here, and now we're working all Hornets. So it's really important, if you're coming from out of the area, you may not be familiar. What do you mean by noise and accident zones? Because they didn't have them where they came from.
The interesting thing about noise and accident zones, or noise zones, is that some of the most exclusive, highest priced properties in this area are in high dBA noise
high
zones.
Noise zones. I mean, noise zones high enough to where you might
multi-million dollar house. I know of one that's on the market for $12 million, and it's 70 to 75.
Correct.
And nobody cares.
And and outside you need ear protection, or you have to stop talking. So it's really important when you come into Hampton Roads. That's a key factor to know when you're making an offer on a property.
Let's move on. Let's move on to walkthrough, home inspection. You guys go at it.
Okay, well, the home inspection comes first, and the walkthrough pretty much is to make sure that everything was in the same order as when you walked into that house and bought it initially, and that the items on the home inspection were done.
And that's a key point. That the other issue that gets sometimes confused with home buyers inspections or home inspections, property inspections, different words for the same thing, is the appraisal. There's confusion out there that, well, isn't the appraisal an inspection on the house?
Yeah, VA buyers especially feel that they're going to get a VA inspector to come out and really inspect the house, and that's not really true at all.
Well, and they don't. And when you look at the documents, it's very clear that the appraisal is just there to determine the value of the house. They're not coming out to do an inspection like a home buyer's inspection is.
But talk about notations in the appraisal, notations of need for repair.
Yeah, the VA, I think the VA, well, I know for a fact that the VA appraisers have to be approved, hired by the lender, approved by that lender, and they do look for certain things in the home that have no peeling paint, appliances. Same
with FHA. FHA and VA tend to be the strictest appraisals because of the lending requirements and the guarantees that stand behind the loans.
Yep, toilets must work, so things like that. But the appraiser doesn't go on the roof. He doesn't go underneath the crawl space. He doesn't test the appliances. He just makes a note that they're there. So it's deeper than the other ones, but not an inspection like I think some of the VA buyers or FHA buyers feel in their head they're going to get.
Yeah, right. It's not an inspection, not in any stretch of the imagination.
However, folks, let's be realistic. A VA or an FHA appraiser can mandate repairs that have not been noted in a home inspection.
Yes.
And I have had houses that did not appraise, or rather they appraised, but only on the condition that the roof be replaced.
Correct.
So that's a mandated repair.
Correct.
And in the contract, there is a provision written in, and if you leave it blank, it's automatically 1%. But I've seen as high
1% of what?
Of the sales price. It's automatically 1% of the sales price that has to be set aside, and you can't, and the seller is contractually obligated to expend that amount of money to repair walkthrough items, appraiser mandated items, and any termite and moisture.
And those
nothing with regard to the home inspection.
Right.
That's cumulative.
Correct.
1%.
Cumulative.
So $400,000 is only $4,000. And in the instance where my client was told by the appraiser that his house would appraise, but only if a new roof were put in, that was $7,000. It was a very simple house over there in Indian Hills or whatever. And it was not expensive, but it meant that his cushion of dollars he was going to net from the sale after he paid off his mortgage had diminished by $6,000.
What if the seller said, I'm not doing it?
Then it would not appraise, and it would not close. The VA would not close it.
Right.
Well, but it also opens up negotiations again.
Correct. And so if the appraisal, the termite moisture inspection, well and septic, if you happen to have well and septic as main services on your house, and the walkthrough that we're talking about now, if any repairs are required under all of those, that 1% of the sales price, say in this case $4,000, the seller is obligated by the contract, if that's the way it's been written and accepted, to spend $4,000. If the cost of those things exceeds that $4,000 by 1 penny, then you can negotiate who's going to pay the difference. And if you can't come to an agreement, the contract can be terminated properly, legally, and the buyer would receive their earnest money deposit back.
And you know what's the new rule with the VA is the VA buyers can now pay for their termite and moisture, and they can also pay for repairs.
Right. The VA buyer, it can be negotiated on who pays for some of these fees that in the past they weren't allowed to pay for. So, again, home property inspections, home inspections, kind of the same thing and stuff, versus a walkthrough. The inspections are there up front, usually as a contingency in the contract. Contingencies mean they have to be satisfied to get to the closing table.
I had a home inspection today, and the home inspector, I asked him, "Are you busy?" He says, "Well, I'm not as busy as we normally are, but the one thing that I've noted," and this is a home inspector who probably does 3 a day at least, every day. That's 15 a week. He's done, I don't know how many thousands over his career, because he's been in the business 17, 18 years. 60% of the inspections he does, of the inspections he's doing now, are for informational purposes only.
Correct.
And the thing he stressed to me was make certain that you accept, EXCEPT, you remove from that as is statement the walkthrough items, because walkthrough items are the systems of the house.
Correct.
Right.
And again, that ties into a very confusing paragraph in these contracts, what we call paragraph 13 and how that's written. But again, the point being, property inspections, whether they're for informational purposes only or whatever, actually look at the condition of the house, the systems of the house. Do the windows work? Does the heat and air work? Condition of the roof? All those kind of things. Whereas walkthrough is at the end, just before closing, to come back in, and if repairs were agreed to in the contract, to make sure the repairs were done properly, and to go through the walkthrough items that are on a separate form to make sure those items are working properly.
Yes, and you can also bring your inspector back just to look at the items that you agreed upon to be repaired, not to go through the house again, just to go back to make sure that those items have been repaired correctly.
Right. Inspectors can't do the walkthrough. And
Correct.
A good listing agent
Knows
is
how to
going
do
to
a
know
walkthrough.
that and be there for the walkthrough and make sure that the inspector is not coming back and doing the walkthrough for the buyer. And if they are, professionally, you step in the middle and say, can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a good agent comes prepared too. I mean, I always have zip ties. I always have a flashlight. I always have an outlet tester and a pair of binoculars, because sometimes you need to look at the roof or things that you can't see from the ground. So I think, you have a good agent who's out there to serve you. They're there prepared. Now, it is the buyer's walkthrough. Yes. Not the agents. So you have to make sure you have to sign the buyers to do things, and they get a little bit, they kind of scatter like cats, looking at their new house, and you have to kind of reel them in, because actually they need to witness all those things working.
And that's where the agent comes into play, is you're kind of like the director of the orchestra, even though the orchestra might only have 2 people in it. or one person or whatever to make sure those things get properly addressed.
The key thing to remember, folks, when you're the buyers, is that you are the principal to this transaction. Your agent is your agent. He cannot or she cannot take your place as a principal. And it is incumbent upon you to exercise all due diligence and care to make certain that the house is what you expect it to be, and to make certain that if you requested any repairs, they've been done. And there have been no other changes to the house since the contract was written and ratified.
Correct. And that's done at the walkthrough.
Right.
And
now, I'm going to make another couple suggestions to you. If while you're walking through your house that you're buying, prior to the walkthrough, you've now got a ratified contract. Okay, ask for an opportunity to go through the house again and take a picture of what appliances are in place. Take a picture of other elements of the house that you believe to be conveying, because you have a contract that says these items convey. Have a picture. Boom, 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 boom. Now, why is that valuable? Well, I bought a house way back many years ago, and the guy didn't like the deal, but he was forced into the deal for a variety of reasons because of the financial situation he found himself in, and he decided to substitute a brand new refrigerator that was on the conveyance list with the one that was in the garage. And all I had to do was go, hey, here's a picture of the refrigerator that was in the house when I wrote the contract. Where is it? And because he had spirited it off to New Jersey, he ended up buying me a new
And that's a good point, because it's the only way that you're going to be able to prove, because many years ago, same thing. One of my buyer clients, when we went through the house and did the inspection, there was a really fancy microwave in there. When we came back for the walkthrough, that fancy microwave was gone, and a bottom line entry-level microwave was on that shelf. And one of my
it's probably a magic shelf.
one of my buyers zeroed in on that, and everything came to a screeching halt. Thankfully, we had a honest seller. Stepped up to the plate and said, yeah, and went out and got a brand, stuff. So that's a great point. That's worth the price of admission right there. Take pictures as the buyer and the buyer's agent of those things so you can prove it when you get to the walkthrough that that's what was there when the contract was ratified and the inspections.
And I'm also going to make a suggestion to you as homeowners. Go ahead, contact a friend who's a realtor, or contact me, or contact Bob or Kim, but hire, at the expense of maybe $300 or $400, a professional individual who can come in and do a virtual tour of your house for the purposes of establishing what you own. And you can bank that, and you can provide it to your insurance company, so in the instance of a catastrophic loss, you have visual proof of what was in the house. There's nothing better than pictures.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Now,
so that
next question.
Difference between... I think we've covered that pretty well.
Yep. Well, The next question: how important is the disclosure? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
I just have one more thing to say to buyers out there. Make sure that your agent puts everything that you want, every inspection that you want, as a contingency on that home inspection, that property inspection contingency addendum, because if you have a chimney that you have a questionable about, you need to be able to put that down. Termite, put that down. If you want the pipes inspected, put that down, because the sellers might be willing to fix it, but you might think it's too far gone and don't want it. And so just make sure that you can get out of all those inspections and have that on that addendum.
And that's a great point for home buyers to realize that a home buyer's inspection doesn't include the chimney, doesn't include the swimming pool, doesn't include the in-ground sprinkler system. I mean,
what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this during the next break, because it's time for us to break. You're listening to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 AM 100.9 FM. We'll be back in a minute, and we'll continue on this discussion of inspections and what can help you in the process.
Now back to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rosenwomble Realtor Paul Fuqua gives you the fundamentals of real estate selling, buying, owning, and improving your home.
Well, thank you for staying tuned. If you're still tuned in, this is Paul Fuqua. This is on the Real Estate PB&J Hour. And one of the things we skipped over because we were so enthused about the other subjects about today that we were covering today is Kim's report on the interest rates. And there have been some changes. So I'm going to give the mic to Kim. Tell us what's going on with the lenders.
All right. Okay, rates. Non-conforming. Remember, that's a jumbo loan. 5% with 0 points. That went up a little bit from last week. Conforming 30-year, 6% with 1 point. That's actually made a little bit better. Conforming investment, 6.125% with 2 points. FHA, 6% with 1 point. VA, 5.5% with 1 point.
And those numbers are, I mean, compared to 6 months ago, what huge changes in those numbers.
Look, let's stop the gloom and doom.
I know.
Because it's still a good time to buy.
There's no gloom and doom, because if you look at the numbers she shared up front on how many houses are still available to buy out there,
exactly. Lenders will find a way to make it possible for you to buy. It may well be that your price point might move down. That's your decision to make. But their whole raison d'etre, the reason they're in business, is to make profit, and the way they make profit is selling you money.
Correct.
Well, here's a stat that I heard from Van Rose when he presented to ODU. He said that there is 1.75 million people in Hampton Roads and only 4,000 homes on the market. So that is a little bit of gloom and doom, but it's still a good time to buy. I still think our prices are still going to remain to rise, and it's a good investment.
Buyers bought houses when the interest rates were 17%. They you figure it out if you want to be a homeowner.
You have to have a place to live.
Correct.
And the best investment, rather than pouring money into a rental property, somebody else's equity, you're building wealth when you buy a house.
Correct.
Plain and simple. And there's no way around it. And if you look at the great wealth that's been accumulated in this country over the centuries, it's been because of the acquisition and maintenance of property. Real estate.
Yes.
It can be acreage, it can be houses, it can be whatever. But if you own a home and you're able to maintain that home and you're able to continue to build your equity in that home, you will have created an estate. And that estate can pass through with certain conditions being set to your heirs, to your family. And the greatest thing that we can do as in our industry is help people get into a house as owners and continue to build equity in that house. That's one of the joys we have, especially with first-time home buyers. The other thing is we get paid.
One of the greatest joys I have is when, whether I'm the listing agent or the buyer's agent, and you watch a first-time home buyer walk into their house that they've closed on, and the smiles on their faces is just, it makes it all worthwhile to see that look on their face, because they're buying their very first home, and it doesn't matter if they're in their 20s or in their 60s, it's just as exciting for them.
I'm going to ask Kim, who is a broker and is far more educated than I, in one element of looking at houses. I have had too many buyers telling me that, I want to look at houses that are 2,400 square feet or larger. And my response has always been, I can show you a 2,400 square foot house that feels like it's 1,200, and I can show you an 1,800 square foot house that feels like it's 3,000 because of its design, because it's open. But what I need to ask her, and Kim, if you can, what constitutes the actual square footage of a house? Is it just the basic house? Is it totality? Or what constitutes living area?
Living areas are those spaces that are heated. Their bedrooms, their living areas, their kitchens. And when you do the square footage, you do include the closets and parts of the stairway. I think there's a little bit of argument in some of the appraisers about the stairways right now. But it's actually heated. You don't have to be air conditioning, believe it or not. So it's a heated space living. Garage is not counted. Attic isn't counted. Detached garages with apartments aren't counted. Rooms over the garage that don't have at least 7-foot ceilings and where you can stand up, that's not counted. So you have to be really careful about what is actually counted. Now, you might put in the agent remarks, or you might have a room over the garage that's very functional and livable. It maybe even has a bathroom, but because of the slope of the walls, we call those knees, and the height of the ceilings, we can't count that as square footage, but it can still be usable space. And usually we would add a little bit of money on top of the price of the house for those living areas. Same way with detached garages and pool houses, not counted in square footage, but we do add those as value. The
key being that this heated living area has a source, and the source of heat can't be a pot-bellied stove, or something like that sitting out, and stuff. So, and that's where buyers that start their searches online have to be very careful. The online source that they're going to, all of us here in this room have websites that can connect a buyer directly to the multiple listing service, where they're going to get the most accurate information on what they're looking for. You start getting outside of the multiple listing service and you're playing with fire on whether or not the information that you're getting is accurate and up to date, just like you referenced earlier in the program, Kim.
Well, the other thing we have to remind the folks that living area is the actual measurements are not taken internally. They're taken externally by the appraisers. And then they use a formula to calculate space within that. So I will tell a tale of myself. There was a house that was questionable about the footage, and I met the appraiser out there, and he was all by himself, and he had an accident and was having difficulty getting around. So I said, well, I'll hold the other end of your tape. And as he walked away, I kept pulling it. So I added 6 inches to each of the 2 dimensions where I was holding the end of the tape.
And hopefully you were the listing agent.
I was the listing agent. He caught me anyway, so it became a joke every time I'd see him. But
that was the longest 30-foot house he'd ever seen.
The guy, he kept looking at these measurements, and anyway, because it was in a cookie cutter neighborhood. Where
broker's relationship. Didn't you want to talk about broker's relationship?
Yeah, how important is that? It's a disclosure.
And what does it mean?
I don't know. I do know, but I'm going to ask you to, because you are far more capable at describing it than I. Go ahead. What's the importance of the disclosure of brokerage relationship?
And I'll let Kim answer that. My part of this will be, what is brokerage relationship? Brokerage relationship in real estate is who represents who. The realtor is going to represent somebody, a buyer or a seller, typically, not 100% of the time. There are some exceptions when you become a transaction coordinator or you have a client and a customer. So sometimes, but brokerage relationship is basically who the realtor is representing in the transaction.
Correct. It's an agreement between you and the buyers, because what buyers don't realize is if you don't have representation, that realtor that brings you into that house actually represents the seller. They don't represent you. You have to have your own signed representation, or otherwise that agent can't disclose to you some very pertinent facts that might help you make a better deal with that home.
Correct. And for sellers, when they sign the listing contract with Rose and Womble Realty, they are entering into a brokerage relationship to where Rose and Womble Realty represents them as a client, and their individual listing agent can kind of be looked at as like a sub-agent of the company.
Right.
That's their representation in the listing documents. The buyer has a buyer agency document to sign that now gives them representation. And both of those agents, buyers and seller agent, can negotiate on behalf of their client.
Correct.
And it's required by the state of Virginia. Law requires that brokerage relationship be disclosed in writing at the earliest possible moment when you start talking nuts and bolts about real estate. You've got to do it, and it's got to be in writing by law.
Right. And in the brokerage agreement with the buyer, those buyers agree to work with you, and you agree to work with the buyers, and it's a binding contract. So, if you walk, if worked with this agent and they've showed you houses and everything, and all of a sudden you walk away for some reason, you find another agent you want, you close on the house, they could actually come back after you for some commissions.
It's a contract.
It's a contract.
And so understand when you're signing a contract what the guts of the contract are.
Yes, it's a contract but the main thing that I like about what buyers don't realize is disclosure and accountability. That's the two main things that an agent will owe you if you've signed a contract with them. We'll owe you care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accountability, and so I just confidentiality. Yep. So I think that's real important to realize that we have to uphold a code of ethics and owe you all that. So if we know something about the house, it's our duty to report that to you.
I'm going to bring something up because this is within the body of the contract. When you sign it as a buyer or as a seller, you are acknowledging the fact that there is this relationship between the parties and their agents. That's important.
Yes.
The other element to discuss there is what constitutes a breach of contract. We have it. There's a discussion in the contract. What's a breach?
And in our parlay, or whatever that word is, default. Yeah. What can get you into a position of default when there's a contract? And what I tell my sellers and buyers is one of my jobs in representing them is to keep them from getting into a position of default or even a gray area that could put them in a position of default. And that's where having a good real estate attorney that I can pick up and call and say, I got a question here. It's a gray area. I'm not quite sure. How do you recommend we proceed to keep my client away from that slippery slope of default?
Kim, what are the consequences of a default by one of the two parties?
Well, first of all, money is up to that. Your earnest money deposit. Whoever is the defaulting party really forgoes that earnest money deposit. The sellers can get it from the buyers if the buyers defaulted. If the buyers default, they also have to pay the appraisal. If they've already had that appraisal, there's other fees. They maybe they owe some buyers some commissions to the agents. So there's a lot at stake here.
And no matter what kind of contract you're talking about, default is not where you want to be, and you don't want to test the system and see if you can get out of it without any harm. That's you don't go there, and a good realtor will keep you from going there.
Yeah, and that's the importance of a really high earnest money deposit in this market, is you want it to be where the buyers have enough skin in the game, they don't want to walk away. But actually, you do not have to have an earnest money deposit.
Yeah, because it says in consideration of any contract.
Love and affection.
Well, that can be.
Yes.
However, it could be as little as a candy bar.
Yes.
As long as it has some kind of value and it's as a consideration. But I've been doing this for 25 years. Before that, I owned a big printing company, and we had all kinds of relationships with people. And in essence, they were implied contracts because they were pure purchase orders and all. And I honestly can't ever think of anybody ever approaching me and saying that I want to do this, here's the contract, but I'm not going to provide any kind of consideration. And my law school training says then it's not a valid contract.
Correct. And what we talked about several programs ago, if you're the buyer, you're trying to position yourself with the help of your realtor to be the buyer who is in first position and buys the house. So all this stuff figures into it.
Right. And then, just real quick, when you do have a default, our contracts state that you'll go into mediation and then arbitration. Mediation is suggestions. A person comes in there and kind of mediates between the two. You try to come to an agreement that both of you can live with and agree upon. Arbitration is final. That's where you go in there, you make a decision, and that's the decision. And then if that's not going to work, then you go on into the courts into litigation. But you don't want to. No one wants to be in that situation.
No one wants to try out mediation just because they've got nothing else to do.
Yeah,
I can tell you, in 25 years, I've had one instance of arbitration, and it was a new construction, and the choice was made by the husband and was signed by both parties of the color of the cabinets in the kitchen. And then at final walkthrough, and there had been multiple walkthroughs and multiple punch list inspections. At final walkthrough, the lady of the house said, "Those aren't my white cabinets." And we responded, the builder responded, "Here they are. Here's the signed order. You ordered this as a beautiful natural maple, bop, 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 bop." And it became a bone of contention. And before they'd closed, they insisted to go to arbitration, not even mediation. My builder decided that he was not going to paint these beautiful cabinets, and he was not going to replace them. And we had all the documents in writing there.
Yes.
All signed off. The arbitrator came in. Boom, $4,500 from the builder to paint the cabinets.
Yes, because in writing is enforceable.
It was in writing,
yes.
And it was initialed, but it was for the natural maple, not the white cabinets.
And the arbitrator
said, "I don't care. This lady gets her white cabinets."
Correct. And got them.
The money came out of Paul Fuquay's pocket because Paul Fuquay had told his builder client, "I got this."
That was so nice of you.
Yeah, well, look. All right, we got 2 minutes, folks. So if you want me to sell your house and you are changing the color of the cabinets, that's your decision. You're going to stand behind it. But, okay, we know that, Bob, you have anything to say? You promoting
I
this
do.
Saturday
The Word
again?
from Walls.
Okay.
My wife, Deborah, is the author. The book launch is Saturday at 4 o'clock at the Muse Writers Center on Colonial Avenue in Norfolk. We're going to have snacks. I'm going to be there, so you can come and say hi to this radio personality, and you'll have a great time.
All right, Kim, your shot.
All right. Well, I just thank you for letting me come on this show, Paul. I really enjoy it. And I just want to say, hey, it's still a good time to sell your house. So if you're sitting on it, come on, call us.
Great time to buy.
Call us at the Greenbrier office of Rose and Womble, because I think it's a great time to buy. There's sell. I'm so sorry. And it's a great time to buy, too, by the way. But anyway, great time to sell. So let's put it on the market.
All right, I have a minute to finish up. Next week, we're not quite sure what our surprise will be, but I can guarantee it's going to be a good conversation. I know Kim will be back. Bob won't be back next week. He's going to be away. He's down in the Outer Banks someplace, or Wintergreen.
Massanutten,
okay?
yes.
So, but I thank you for listening. This is Paul Fuquay with Rose and Womble, and you've been listening to the Real Estate PB&J Hour. Go to the YouTube channel, the Real Estate PB&J Hour, and give a listen. Talk to you next week.